Welcome everyone to the Sister Stories podcast. The aim of this podcast is to marvel at God's sovereignty over each of our lives as women and to encourage one another by sharing our stories. My name is Sophie and today I'm joined by Rosie.
Hey, hi. Hi.
Welcome. First of all, can you start by telling us who you are?
Yeah, so I'm Rosie. I'm married to Chris. We've got 2 little kids, a 4-year-old girl, a 1-year-old boy. So that's lots of fun. I work in fashion e-commerce. I work currently with a friend who's launched her own clothing label, Flexi Hours. So that's great. Great fun.
Great. So let's start with your family background and your upbringing. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I grew up in a Christian home. I had a really happy childhood, so I was really fortunate. My mum is English and she comes from a family of some really inspiring individuals of faith, actually. Her parents were missionaries in Nigeria. Her grandparents were missionaries in India. So God's really blessed that family throughout the generations. And my dad's from Egypt and he comes from a Coptic Christian background. And that has brought a real richness of understanding from a young age about the differences of faith from different cultures and backgrounds. And so that's a real privilege to have that. And I've got 2 older brothers who, both as long as I can remember, have been Christians, and they're living out really solid Christian lives now.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
How did that play out, these differences of faith? What was your understanding of that as a child? What did you see of that?
I think I was just struck with the unity. I think it was really powerful to see my parents together from totally different cultures and backgrounds. And I think before they got married, people had questioned whether it would work, but just seeing how God unifies people across different cultures, and they've just got a wonderful marriage, and they're a wonderful example to me growing up of how, you can be different in your personality and your culture, but God unifies you. So that was a really positive thing.
Yeah. And what was your experience of church growing up? Did you go to church regularly, or what was your understanding of?
Yeah, we went to a really lively, big family church down in Torquay where I grew up, and it was brilliant. We loved going. I went to Sunday school, like the little class for kids each week. And it always made sense to me that there was a God. I don't think I ever doubted it. Just, looking at the smallest thing like a leaf on a tree and seeing the complexities of it. It just always made sense that there was a designer and a creator behind it. And then hearing the stories about Jesus and hearing how wonderful and incredible he was in his life, how he loved people, and how he, lived out this life which impacted so many. I was drawn to him and drawn to listening to his stories as a little kid. So all positive. Yeah.
Wow. So what about your personal faith then? How did these things actually become personal to you, really?
Yeah, so I always understood it and believed it. And I think I was still at primary school when I went to a holiday club at church during one of the half terms, I think. And the guy at the front at the end of the week said, you need to make a decision. This isn't about your family. It's not about your friends. It's not what they think or what they believe. Actually, it's you. You need to make a decision. I never thought of that before. I just sort of assumed that, I was part of a Christian family, but I thought, oh gosh, I've got to make a decision. And I thought, well, yeah, of course I want Jesus in my life. Jesus is amazing. So I told my mum when I got home, and she gave me a little booklet that just described it really simply for a kid. And I remember reading through that and just, reading that there's a barrier between us and a holy God, and that barrier is sin. It's all the little things and big things that we've done that are not right with God, and we need to say sorry and trust that Jesus has taken away that barrier by taking the punishment on himself. So we get to be friends with God. And as a kid, you know, like, wow, we get to be friends with God. That's amazing. And so, yeah, and I prayed and asked Jesus to be in my heart. And I think being a kid, I expected something magical to happen. So I thought, you know, some glitter would fall from the ceiling or some stars would appear. But yeah, nothing happened. But I knew I'd done the right thing. And yeah, I really believe God had a hand on me, even though I was young. And it was a genuine prayer. Yeah.
Right. So how did that faith develop later on in your life then? Did that carry on, do you feel, or did you go away for a little bit? How did that develop?
Yeah, I think, you know, although it was a genuine prayer, I didn't properly understand a lot of it. And my teenage years were full of angst. For sure. I suddenly felt really big feelings and big emotions and full of, you know, you get swamped with hormones. It can be quite a tricky time. Yeah. And I definitely felt a lot of stuff that I didn't know how to deal with. So that made me become quite inward focused and focused on myself. And I became very selfish and very self-absorbed. And I was just trying to figure out who I was and what all these feelings were. So yeah, teenage years were kind of, I was fine at school and with friends, but at home, my safe space, I was taking it out on my parents for sure. They took the brunt of it. And I didn't know how to navigate it. So I just really ended up focusing on myself rather than on God or my faith. And that just grew and grew until I left for university. Yeah. And suddenly I had freedom as well. So the combination really just led me to a really hedonistic lifestyle. And I just threw myself into a lifestyle which gave me the most pleasure and me the most, you know, kind of feel good experience. You know, I was out clubbing and partying and having a whale of a time, but there was an emptiness underneath it. It was very superficial, and it was all about me, for sure. Every choice I made, it was about what can I get out of it? What can make me feel good? And not thinking about what God would think about it at all.
Did you still feel drawn to coming to church though at that time, or how was that for you?
I know, it's funny, isn't it? I think I just definitely had within me, and you know, I had asked Jesus into my life, and I do believe he had his hand on me, and I felt I needed to be part of church. So I did connect with the church, and I went, but I was very much on the outskirts, and I went to enjoy the social side of things and meet other students, but I did not want to talk to anyone who would challenge me on how I was living my life. I would avoid that like the plague, because I became that phrase, like a Sunday Christian. I'd come to church but then live throughout the week for myself, and it was quite a, looking back, there was a battle within me for sure, that I was trying to, you know, I knew the truth, but it wasn't in my heart. I wasn't living it out.
I wonder how your family reacted. I mean, obviously you were far away from them at university, but whether they were aware of that and what their reaction was to your lifestyle.
Yeah, I think it was really hard for them, especially my parents. They have always been an example of unconditional love. So I think knowing that, you know, I was kind of going through that and knowing how selfishly I was living my life, I'm sure, well, I know, I gave them a lot of sleepless nights, but they were praying for me, and what a powerful thing that is, knowing that, and in retrospect, so I'm eternally grateful for that, and they would always be there for me, but I think they knew that I had to find my way back to God and find my own path. I certainly wouldn't be told. So I had to find that out the hard way back. Yeah.
But I guess that's when you see the impact of prayer, and sometimes that takes years, doesn't it? But we don't, in the moment, we just think, oh, it's going to be instantaneous and it's going to just sort out everything. But actually, sometimes it does take a long time. But that perseverance from them it is a great blessing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. So how did you find your way back eventually? How did that happen?
It all came to a head, I guess, the way that I was living. I got in a relationship with a guy who actually was a Christian. So I thought, oh gosh, this is going to sort out everything,
That's interesting, because it's often the other way around, that the person who's a Christian, who dates a non-Christian, for example, thinks, oh, that's going to make them a Christian. So it's interesting that you were thinking that. I often hear people thinking the other way around, but anyway.
No,
sorry, that's just funny.
You think the strange things that you out of relationships. But I think I just thought, this will give me the peace that I'm missing. This will kind of settle me and I feel great. But I obviously wasn't in the right frame of mind, and I had some awful habits I got into, so I was with him, but I really cared for him, but because I was so wrapped up in myself and so self-absorbed, and I treated him really badly, and I cheated on him throughout the year and a half I was with him, and I just thought I could get away with it. This is how far my head was gone in my own world. I thought I could do whatever I want as long as it made me feel good, and it didn't matter what the impact I had on anyone else. But it came to an abrupt end a year and a half into it, where he just sat me down and said, Rosie, I love you. You're destroying me. This is killing me. And he broke off. That was the shock I needed. And it's strange that I was shocked, and people might think, why were you shocked if you were behaving in that way? But that's the blindness that you get when you're not, you're just refusing to think about how you're living. It was a wake up call, and actually that was God's kindness, because I looked at myself for the first time and I thought, gosh, I don't recognise myself. I don't know who I've become. It's really ugly. The way that I treated him and others, and kind of left people hurt in my wake. That's just, I can't believe I've kind of slipped that far. And a ton weight of guilt fell on me from how I treated him and others previously. And it felt suffocating. And I went to a really dark place, actually. I felt like I couldn't breathe with the weight of it. And I remember just waking up in the morning and thinking, I don't want to wake up. I had really quite dark thoughts. So I wasn't in a good place. And my parents, again, they were really worried about me and what I was thinking and feeling. So I ended up going back home to my to their house, and I went into my bedroom where I grew up, and I literally fell on my knees and just sobbed my heart out. And I felt I had this weight on my back, and I just cried out to God for the first time, genuinely from the depths of my soul. And I said, God, if you love me, if you still love me in this mess, you need to help me, because I just don't know how to deal with this. I can't get rid of this guilt, and it weighs a ton, and I need your help. And in that moment, it tangibly felt like he just reached down and picked up this weight off my back, and he lifted it up, and it felt like I could breathe. And the next moment felt completely flooded with his love for me. And I just got it in that moment, and I realised what I'd been missing. I'd had the head knowledge and I'd known the truth, but it hadn't translated to my heart. And I'd been missing the whole relationship side with him. I hadn't been including him in my day-to-day, in talking to him, in leaning on his strength to get me through, and his guidance and his wisdom, and the fact that he loved me so much. And I just kind of turned my back on him and wanted to be the boss of my own life. We all have someone on the throne of our lives. And for most people, it's us, it's yourself. And we have to get ourselves off the throne and put God back on the throne in his rightful place. And that's what I hadn't been doing. So I got it in that moment. It made sense what I'd been missing. And it's not like everything suddenly became easy. You know, I'd got into a lot of bad habits and I'd become so self-absorbed. I had to unwrap all of that. But I had God with me now, personally with me, in a relationship who I could talk to, I could pray to, and his strength to get me up, dust me off every time I stumbled and fell, and him to just grow me, strengthen me. And it was completely different because I wasn't doing it in my own strength anymore. It was him as the boss of my life being my strength and taking charge, which is what I desperately needed, and that gave me freedom.
Yeah, that's amazing, because I feel sometimes, you're right, that you had the head knowledge, but in a sense, until you experienced it for real, what it actually means to be a sinner who needs forgiveness, you can't understand it sometimes. And we all need to come to that realization somehow, seeing our actions or that of people around us or something. And I feel like however much we might know this, and I see this in Sunday school when I teach the kids now, they just understand. But I keep on telling them, you need to make that your own. You need to, it can't just stop at you sitting here thinking you're part of a family that is Christian and you come to church, so you're all right. It just can't stop there. So, but I know that it probably won't happen for them until they actually experience something similar. But it's really interesting how God's mercifully carried you through all of these problems and troubles, in a sense, but at the other end rather, just got you through and showed you how you needed his grace through all of that.
I mean, goodness, I get God's grace. I really get the depths of God's grace because of what where I got to, and I see that as such a kindness, actually, that I understand how much he gave for us and how much he loves. He absolutely loves each one of us. And I kind of feel like I wouldn't have got that unless I'd kind of had something to kind of really, open up my eyes to that.
That's great. So you're now married with 2 kids. How did you meet actually with Chris? Sorry, taking it further.
Yeah, sure. So I ended up moving to London. I just always loved London, so I just thought I'd move here. I didn't have a job, thought I'd get on here. I was. I was part of a church in central London, and to be honest, I was struggling to find someone I was attracted to who was Christian. In all honesty, and I kind of got to the point. I was like, God, you need to bring me someone. and I was like, I'm going to try and forget about it, and I'm going to get involved in church, and I'm going to, help get really stuck in. And I was helping to lead Christianity Explored courses and things like that. And I think God really honoured that commitment, actually, because then it felt like he dropped Chris out of the sky on the steps of the church, and he just kind of turned up out of the blue. It really felt like that. And we literally got together that week with no kind of messing around. It felt as if this is the man God's given me. It took him a lot longer to kind of be convinced, but I called my mum. It was so funny the next week and said, I've met the man I'm going to marry. She's like, yeah, calm down. But it was. It was a real gift, I feel. And he's such a solid, strong character. And God knew that I needed that. I think he's really settled me down, and he's really been a gift. And God knew exactly the kind of man I needed. Yeah. So I'm so grateful for that.
Oh, that's great. So going a bit closer to now, is there anything that you have learned in the last year or so that you'd like to share with people?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, so much. I'm just always learning, new things about God. But I mean, I think recently, just the reminder that God is bigger than anything we come into, that looking at the world, I don't know about you, but I just get so overwhelmed with the news feed.
Yeah.
what's going on in the world, just the pain and the suffering and the brokenness. And it can feel overwhelming when we look at it. And I think it's just the reminder that God holds this world in his hand. He made this world. He sees every little thing that is going on. And we mustn't lose sight of that. We need to keep our head up and our eyes fixed on him. And he is the one that brings hope and light into this world. And we have to remind ourselves, because I think, especially when we're walking with God and he's opening our eyes to a lot of the pain and the suffering, it's quite easy to get bogged down in it. But it's just a reminder that we need to not reduce God and what he can do, but just remind ourselves that he is big enough, his grace is big enough, and he's doing amazing things in this broken world, and he's got a plan for it, and he's going to bring it back to a place of restoration. And we need to be sharing that hope with people, gosh, don't we, when we look at this world.
Yeah, exactly.
So I keep being reminded of that.
Yeah. And do you have any advice that you'd like to give to younger Christians, perhaps, or maybe younger parents even?
I think something that's really striking for me is that we are all made so uniquely. God's given us unique gifts, unique talents, a unique position in this life, your circumstances, where you live, the people you're connected to, who God brings you into contact with. Trust him that he's got a plan for you and only you. You're unique. Don't compare yourself. Don't think, that person in church is doing this. Talk to God and figure it out between you and God what it is, and he brings you those opportunities of how to reach and impact a hurting world. And it's so incredible when you ask him for those opportunities, because he really does open up the doors for you and only you. And it's such a privilege and it's so exciting, and there's nothing like it when you're doing what God's got planned for you. And that's true for every single person, that he knows you intimately.
Yeah, that's right. And I think we get so influenced by the world in looking at ourselves as individuals almost, and just seeing how, we want to, I guess we compare ourselves to others, and we want to compete with others and be better and fitter and more intelligent or whatever it might be. But actually, you're right, God sees us as individuals and as people who are unique, and he values each one of us separately. With separate gifts and different gifts. That's a great thing to remember, isn't it? Great. Thank you so much, Rosie, for sharing your story with us today. And thank you, everyone, for listening. This is all for today's episode of Sister Stories, but join us again